Have you ever looked at a bunch of different products? They might look kind of similar, but a little bit different, but you just don't know what they are or how to really choose. Well, I just came back from Formnext in Germany. It was a great show. I spent a lot of time with Rick and Disrupt at the show. And one of the key questions I kept getting from the show was, how do I choose the right hotend for my printer? So today, this is what we're gonna dive into in this video, especially on Magnum Plus and Prime. My name is Xiao. I'm an application engineer at Slice, and I mainly work with different OEM partners or B2B customers to kind of help them through their selection process on figuring out the best and most appropriate components for their industrial printer and their industrial needs. So typically, whenever a customer comes to Slice, they're normally in two different phases. One is they're just about to start building a printer, whether you're a prosumer or an OEM, or they already have a printer and they want to increase their productivity or lower or even eliminate their downtime entirely. Because there are a lot of different components in a printer, and hotends and extruder often are the most critical component to dictate whether a machine will operate as perfectly as possible. So in a production environment, if you can put your printer as close to running 24/7 as possible, that's certainly ideal because time is money, right? And when Slice set out to design our components, whether it's the Mosquito, now Magnum Plus, or even Prime, that was really the essence we wanted to capture, where we wanted to help boost the confidence for the operator on the machine can trust the printer to print overnight, on a very large print, 100+ hour job without any failure. So everybody knows Slice started with Mosquito, and now we have Mosquito Magnum, ultimately Copperhead. And I think it was in 2021 when we launched our Magnum Plus. And back in 2023 in the summer, when we're at Rapid, we debuted our Mosquito Prime.
Do a little tour, walkthrough of the booth. We'll also talk a little bit about the new stuff that we've launched here at Rapid 2023. The other thing that we've launched here at the show is called Mosquito Prime. And Mosquito Prime is our highest flow rate hotend to date. It's got a 61mm melt zone, 150 watts of heating power, a die in the center that splits the flow and allows for laminar higher speed printing. And of course, like all of our Mosquito hotends, it's rated to 500 degrees Celsius and takes anything from PLA to peak in terms of its capacity to print.
And really, Magnum Plus and Prime are tailored for folks specifically that wanted to run production needs, because the throughput we have on the hotends are quite phenomenal, right? We have customers using Prime printing all the way up to 1 kilo an hour. With Magnum Plus, you can do even 400 or 500 grams worth of material an hour just fine. So what that means for different OEMs or printer operator is that you can get more things done in the same period of time. So if you're an OEM or really a prosumer, at an engineering firm running printer 24/7, for prototyping or production purposes. So how do you really choose between Magnum Plus or Prime? So if you are an OEM and you're trying to run Magnum Plus or Prime, ultimately it is a productivity toolhead for you. So you get to print faster, your customer gets to print faster just because of the higher throughput. And because of how our hotends are designed to have the ability to print anywhere between PLA, ABS, PETG to nylon, TPU, anything with CF, GF filled, all the way on the high end, you got the Peak, Peck, and Ultim. It actually simplifies your inventory management to have a single hotend that works for all the materials. And ultimately, because of the reliability these hotends offer, it gives your user the confidence to print large parts or high volume parts overnight. And if you were to be an operator, running a print farm, or really an engineer at a firm running prototypes, you get to finish your prints a lot faster with the same, if not better quality. And it actually gives you the confidence to promise your manager or your customers a faster turnaround time so that you can outperform your competitor. And because of how the Mosquito family has a design to easily swap between nozzles, you ultimately end up with a versatility to provide a much wider range of service to your partner, to your customers. Now, the question becomes, how do I really choose between Magnum Plus or Prime? The most straightforward thing is that the size itself is already different. So naturally that can be a place to start, but at the same time, the throughput is different. Assuming you want to max out productivity, prime typically would be the way to go. But what we do need to consider is the nozzle itself for prime. The minimum we recommend is 0.8 millimeter. So you need to be good with that first. And to get the most out of Mosquito Prime, the heater spec will be set at 150 watts. So we'll need to double check whether your printer will work with that too. So typically this is a good place to start. And ultimately the size itself, the envelope, the design envelope is slightly different. So when we look at your print head or look at your printer, we'll need to evaluate whether it fits within your current design or whether you need to make any changes towards it too. But typically what prime works well is for large format printer, right? If it's a larger printer, typically that means you're printing larger stuff. And for larger items, you wouldn't want to print with 0.2 or 0.4 millimeter nozzle. You would want to go for a larger one. So that's typically where prime works really well. If you're running like, let's say a 500 millimeter cube or even a meter cube or above printer, you're trying to run FDM and ultimately wanted to get finer detail as opposed to pellet extrusion, then prime is certainly the way to go. Whereas on the other hand, if you want to have higher throughput still, so basically productivity, but you want a more finer detail with 0.4, 0.6 millimeter nozzle, then we would normally recommend just going with Magnum Plus. So, oh no, that's really some of the foundational element when we look at choosing between the two. Both will work well from just boosting productivity standpoint. And if you really fine tune your machine, there's always room for improvement to get the most out of these Hotends. So for example, on the Magnum Plus side, we have quite a few different customers printing shoe soles, like insoles over across Europe and Asia. It does require a finer detail in terms of thinner strings between each print, but then they still want to have the productivity with it. We have actually customer printing 3 to 4 insoles every hour on a TPU with Magnum Plus because they were able to fine tune the machine, and the throughput itself for Magnum Plus was able to handle that. So what that means is they're printing really close to 400 grams worth of TPU every hour. And because they wanted the machine to be a productivity tool, this was a natural fit. Even though the component they're investing in is slightly more expensive than some of the other peers, but because the productivity they get out of the printer ultimately justify these initial investment for the hardware. On the flip side, we actually have customer using prime that print basically super large parts that might not require all the intricate details of a 0.4 or 0.6 nozzle that they offer. So we actually have folks running prosthetic legs that are ISO certified. We have folks in Europe doing theatrical parts or essentially film studio backgrounds. We actually have a customer in Portugal using prime to mass produce surfboards because it's so large in its nature, and as long as it's watertight, it kind of doesn't matter. And prime simply became a natural fit for these customers and for their applications. So now you understand the difference between Magnum Plus and Prime and really the applications and use cases behind them. So one of the bonus questions we hope to answer with this video is, how do I really configure my cold side? Whether that be air-cooled, liquid-cooled, or conduction-cooled, which are the three options that we offer at Slice. So a conventional printer typically use an air-cooled Hotend, so you can easily fit a 25 millimeter box fan on it. But when you do have a heated chamber, it does get a little bit complicated because you're not going to blow higher onto the Hotend to try to cool it at the same time. So with our conduction-based heatsink, it actually doesn't matter if you have a heated chamber or not. You can use it in both. Because of how conduct heatsink is designed, you actually have the ability to design a quick release structure around it, which we'll see on the screen here. So with that in mind, with a conduct-based heatsink, you get to have a much easier serviceability, whether it's for preventative maintenance or any troubleshooting needs. In our conduct heatsink, as long as you have direct contact with different metal surfaces, that will be sufficient to cool it. Now, if you are running a heated chamber, it's probably unreasonable to blow hot air onto the heatsink to try to cool it. So typically, our customer would choose between a liquid-cooled option or a conduction-cooled option. With a liquid cool, obviously, it's just like a computer, right? You can run different coolants through, and that will work just fine, even though that does increase the complexity of your wiring or your printer design. But occasionally, you do have multiple different servos or motors in a printer that needs to be cooled at the same time. And we do see customer basically running a single liquid cooling line that is powered by a single motor to cool down all of these electronic components together through the liquid cooled Hotend too. But if you're running a heated chamber and you wanted to use a conduction cooled Hotend, you will need a bellow that kind of separates between the hot side and the cold side. But like I said earlier, with a quick release structure on a conduction cooled hot end, it actually offers much easier serviceability. Whether you're an industrial customer or just an everyday consumer, it works really well. And the cherry on the top for a conduction cooled hot end, because of how short the heat sink is, it actually makes it one of the better hot ends to print TPU. And the example I said earlier about printing 4 insoles in an hour, it was done on a conduction cooled Magnum Plus. So if you're running solid materials and trying to do some production needs, Magnum Plus and Prime are likely the best fit for you. So if you're finally ready to have a peace of mind every day, knowing that you will wake up to a perfect print, check out the links in our description and talk to one of our team members. We're here to help you find the perfect match for your setup. And don't forget to stay zesty.